I did a taster of it.
Is that big enough when it focuses?
You should ask Ava and Amy. They're the ones who can't see.
Ava and Amy, is that big enough?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Alright guys, let's go. Okay, so straight into where we got up to on our last lesson. And alright, we ready? Okay. Alright, to get started, year 12, thank you. I really need to start now, girls, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to reread this first stanza before we finish the annotation of it. The winter evening settles down with smell of steaks in passageways. 6 o'clock, the burnt out ends of smoky days. And now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves about your feet, and newspapers from vacant lots. The showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse steams and stamps, and then the lighting of the lamps. So we had just written about the incessant rain and that bleak atmosphere, and we'd identified the alliteration of the plosive, or the plosive alliteration of the B, and we were about to write the impact of that. So we are writing plosive alliteration, and it makes it harsh, like that plosive being that B sound, which is a harsher sound to something that is like a more of a whispery sound, for example. And so in doing that, it gives us this negative imagery. So let's write harsh sound, and because it's broken blinds and it's also the broken chimney pot, so that things that are broken things, and it's adding to this image of poverty that we had identified earlier when I was talking about the fact that that steak back in this time was quite cheap. Now this next little bit, and at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse steams and stamps, and then the lighting of the lamps. So we have sibilance again with the S sound. We had sibilance previously here with the smell of steaks in passageways, so it's like a return to that sibilant sound. So at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse, so we can really go from here, street, and it steams and stamps, and then I think it does pick up here, even though it's at the end of the next line, and the lighting of the lamps, because we've got the rhyming, it just all links in. So what this does, so sibilance, and it is emulating the persistent noise, and it's also bleak and cold imagery. So if we write and the sibilance that we identified in the second, or actually at the start of the stanza, the smell of steaks in passageways, that was also emulating the sound of, I said, the hissing of the steam pipes and the sizzling of the steaks, and so that's something that's quite persistent. So it's kind of bringing us around to that notion of the persistent noise in the urban streets, and so it's a lack of peace. And it's bleak and cold imagery, the fact that it's a lonely cab horse, and the steams and stamps is when it's really, really cold and the horse is stamping its feet to try and warm up, and you can see the steam coming off the flanks of the horse because of how cold it is. And then we've got a little break and then the lighting of the lamps. Now, when we were talking about the second person here, this you're, and I said, it could be the reader, but it works nicely to think of it as potentially being the person who's lighting the lamps. And so we've got this observation happening just like we did with Prufrock. And so if there's this flaneur who is this unidentified flaneur who's watching what's going on, and maybe the way I imagine it is he's watching this person who's going along lighting the lamps, and even though he says about your feet, I don't think this flaneur ever actually engages with the person lighting the lamps, doesn't say anything or doesn't know him. It's just like talking to him without it being an actual spoken conversation. Now, and then the lighting of the lamps. So we've talked about the fact that this is a time of rapid industrialization and growth, and the lighting of the lamps is indicative of man's increasing power over nature. So the romanticists that came before had that awe of nature, and that the most powerful thing in the world was nature. And then in this era, the increasing technology and power of man was indeed overtaking nature. And so the fact that, when it was dark, and you could light a candle, but it wasn't much in the way of lighting things. So the lighting of the lamps here allows for that that dominance over nature, or man overtaking nature. So let's write man's increasing power over nature and alluding to industrialization. I think that there's a positive idea there as well. There's something about it that, I don't know, that kind of lifts the mood a bit for me. The fact that it's separated a little bit, and then it's like, and then the lighting of the lamps. I think there's maybe a sense of hope, potentially, which doesn't go along with this idea, but it's something to write down nonetheless, because it can be one of those, does that work with what else we see in the poem? So let's write a positive shift with a question mark. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Okay, then we have 2. The morning comes to consciousness, a faint, stale smells of beer from the sawdust trampled street with all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands, with the other masquerades that time resumes. One thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. All right, now we start with the morning, and usually the morning is a positive thing. Okay, in literature you talk about the setting of the sun as being representative of old age or death, the the morning, that time when it's dawn, that symbolises birth and renewal and hope. So that's kind of the trope that we see. When I said here, I feel like there's this positive shift, and then the morning comes to consciousness, there's that expectation that there's going to be this continuation of the positive shift. But he subverts it straight away with stale smells of beer and the sawdust trampled street and the mud, and then the dingy shades. And so there's this deliberate subversion of expectations, very similarly to what was done at the beginning of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So we are going to, actually I don't know if that one will show, we are going to write morning. Oh, sorry, we're not going to write morning, we're going to circle morning, and we're going to write, and I'm linking it to the positive shift hope, and I'm going to add to that, actually I'm going to add a sense of hope, positive shift. Now, the reason why I'm using the different colours is because, but writing it up here, is because I think morning offers a sense of hope along with this lighting of the lamps. So the expectation of so the expectation of the morning offering the hope just suggested is subverted, and then in brackets I've got it ruins, undermines the romantic tropes. Before we even finish the line, we're starting to get a sense that it's not the morning of renewal, because it comes to consciousness. If you think about consciousness, you think about, like, it's not that the morning awakens, isn't it? The morning comes to consciousness. You think of someone who's maybe been on an anaesthetic and they're coming out of that, they're becoming conscious, or someone who's been blackout drunk and then they're returning to consciousness. So the idea of, if you're comes to consciousness, you never jump up all bright and happy and feeling refreshed in those circumstances. It takes a while, you're slow, you're feeling a bit like that groggy awakening, and that you are maybe hungover, especially when we have the smell of beer. So with consciousness, this is starting that subversion, which is then continued for the rest of the stanza. Now, we've got a couple of literary techniques happening. There is comes to consciousness, so the alliteration, which is sharp alliteration. We've also got personification happening here with the consciousness. So and I'm also going to add here, recalls the images in proof rock. Was it when I am formulated? So the formulation of the insect anaesthetic. So I think there's that recalling of those images, which, along with the idea of being hungover, all of it relates to being ill. A faint, stale smells of beer. So now, he talks a bit about what people do in order to escape the monotony. And so because the modernists wrote a lot about the monotony of modern life and the, you know, relentless passage of time and all of that, there's also this criticism of what people do to escape that. And so turning to alcohol, turning to meaningless sex, turning to things that give a sense of satisfaction or pleasure or forgetfulness for a moment, but then lead to nothing in return, or lead to feeling worse off. And so this is very much part of this modernist kind of critique, I guess is the best word. So we've got, can you see that colour or no? I don't know if that's one that doesn't work. Hold on. Tell me if it's not good. Yay or nay? Not great. I'll get a dark one. I won't use it. So we've got hungover, alcohol to escape the pain. alcohol to escape monotony, the pain of existence, the and then with the sawdust trampled streets in the next line, because that's still talking about the alcohol, but it's also alluding to Proof Rock, where it was the sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. So all working together to keep on reminding us of what was going on in Proof Rock. And we've got assonance here too, don't we? It's we've got an internal rhyme here that's caused by the assonance. Hold on. Let's do one thing at a time. Okay, sawdust is allusion to Proof Rock. And it's continuing this image of low socioeconomic. Continuing image of low socioeconomic. Now, the assonance I just mentioned creates this rhyme. So assonance is the use of vowels. It's because alliteration is just your consonants. If it's vowel sounds that are repeated, that's assonance. But what we've actually got going on is the rhyme here, because street and feet, they're a nice, clear, strong rhyme, but we've not got feet at the end here, do we? So we call it an internal rhyme. I'm going to do this at the edge of my book. So we're just going to write just write internal rhyme there. With all the muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. And again, think about routine, and that routine of the working man getting up in the morning and going out into the muddy street and getting coffee, finishing the day with alcohol, starting the day with coffee, finishing the day with alcohol. So that reliance on stimulants to get through life is what he is making us aware of. So we are going to identify that we're talking about, okay, it's predominantly this, to early coffee stands. But here, okay, so with all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. So it's that idea of all its muddy feet. So the busyness of the morning rush hour as people need to get to work by a certain time. So we are going to therefore write the routine. The consumption Okay, so consumption of alcohol at night, coffee in the morning, commenting on modern man's reliance on stimulants to survive a monotonous life. Let's just add to that a self-anesthesia against modernity.
Yeah, you should definitely know.
Alright, I need to turn over the page, so get that written down fairly quickly. Are we all finished? Chloe, are you finished?
Yeah, I am actually. Can you believe that?
Can't.
When you said you need to have this finished soon so I can throw the page, I was on against.
I'm impressed. Alright, we good? Okay, now, finishing off this stanza with the other masquerades that time resumes. Now, the masquerade, referring again back to that idea of wearing a mask, to wear a face to meet the faces that we meet, that was in proof rock, and the need for us to hide our true selves to conform into whatever situation it is that we need to survive in. Let's underline masquerades and write allusion to proof rock.
Black Swan, my favorite film in the world is a thriller, but Black Swan. I'm not saying that I know that it is. This is like a sci-fi character. Yeah, I know that. Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say, yeah, I really don't know who this is. I was like, what about being her face in the film? Black Swan is genuinely my everything. I've watched that film on repeat thousands of times. That's what my dance solo was based on. Like,
Okay, so the masks all individuals wear to conform.
it still grosses me out. Just like and something should be crazy over the middle of this one thing. I was actually dreaming about yeah.
One thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. So the negative adjective of dingy, it's just all building on this very depressing imagery. So let's write negative adjective.
Yeah. When I had it, I have like a bunch of posters of films that I love, like doing my giveaways in my house. And my kids in as well, I have the best range of movies. Yeah. Range is like, it goes from like Scream to
Still really negative.
Well, I'm adding it to in 1,000 furnished rooms because I get a sense there of them all being the same. So that lack of individuality. So lack of individuality, and I think also lack of really knowing anyone. If it's just all the hands, because that's the synecdoche is again. And so we're going to add, guys, we're just going to add the synecdoche here of the hands. Which contributes to not really knowing anyone, the lack of individuality, everyone's the same. Now, in this next section 3, we have a tense shift. Present to past, third to second person. So let me just double check where it is.
Miss, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know how our first stanza we said it was kind of about like the lamplighter?
Yes.
Is there like someone in particular?
Ah, good question. Okay, so guys, don't start talking. This is like classroom discussion, which is good. All right, so if we think of this as being about the flaneur observing the lamp lighter, and here, is there identity that is being observed, or is it the collective, do you think? The morning comes to consciousness, a faint stale smells of beer from sawdust trampled street with all its muddy feet that press. So we've got this this plural idea of the busyness and everybody together and that morning rush hour, all the hands, 1,000 furnished rooms. So I think that he's gone from looking at an individual to then branching out, I guess, like pulling out his gaze to take in the entirety of the street that is now populated by all these people who none of them are happy, can't really identify difference in anyone. They're all just like cogs in the machine, I guess. And remembering that industrialisation made people feel very much like that cogs in the machine, especially people who were working in the factories and on the production lines. This was when, like, a very famous production line was the Ford production line that began in the 20s. I'm relatively sure it was the 20s, when the Ford motor car was suddenly a highly sought after item. It was brand new, and the production lines were those conveyor belts where people were just stood at the one station doing the same thing all day, hour after hour after hour. So if your job is to screw on a bolt and then you do it quickly and screw on the next one and screw on, like, imagine the monotony of doing that and the exhaustion that you would feel, and how painful it is on the body just to place yourself in the same position for 8 hours at a time. So, good place to leave it. We might, yeah, okay, good place to leave it. We'll pick this up again tomorrow, and we'll get it finished tomorrow.